Hello, I'm Roshni Ratrik, a 17-year-old Avanti student from JNV Badpani. I love studying mathematics and I want to become a software engineer. Welcome to Avanti, a show where incredible women who are at the top of their fields share the obstacle they had to overcome to get there. Here is our host, Vandana Goyal.
Meena Lakdawala-Flynn is the daughter of first-generation Indian immigrants who moved to the U.S. when they were teenagers. Growing up in Plano, Texas, to hardworking parents, Meena was a fierce competitor. She excelled at gymnastics from the age of 2 and dreamt of making it to the Olympics. She brought that same fierceness to Wall Street and in 2023 was on the list of 100 most influential women in U.S. finance. After graduating summa cum laude from George Washington University, Meena began her professional career at Goldman Sachs. Today, Meena is the co-head of Global Goldman Sachs Private Wealth Management, overseeing advisors and content specialists around the world. She is one of the most senior women in the 40,000 people strong firm today. You're the daughter of immigrants. Your parents immigrated from India to the United States, met in college, and worked overtime to create a good life for you. Can you share some of their struggles and how they shaped you?
My mom's mom, or my grandmother, she treated her sons differently than she treated her daughters. So, for example, there was no milk allowed for the girls. There were no shoes allowed for the girls until they started school. And this is because she thought that her boys would take care of her and my grandfather when they were older. So my mom's parents weren't involved in a decision of school or college for her. And so while my grandfather did believe in educating schools and he did enroll her in elementary school, my mother enrolled herself in middle school and college. And she really enjoyed studying science and math, and she wanted to be an engineer. And I think she wanted to be an engineer because she was told and that that's not what girls were encouraged to do at that time. So when she was in India, she finished her undergraduate degree in chemistry and physics, and then she came to America to become a chemical engineer. Her mother was against borrowing money to send her to the U.S. because she believed that she was going to get married and move on to her husband's family. And my mom, that being said, made it to America, and she paid for her school by working in a nursing home from 3 to 11 p.m. every day. And in the end, I would say, or I've learned that my grandmother's perspective did change immensely because she saw what my mother did for her and for others and what she was able to accomplish. And ultimately, she did take care of both of her parents in their older age, and she sponsored her brother and her sister to come to the U.S. and help them get started also. My father came from a family of 9 children, so 5 girls and 4 boys, and his father instilled in them, the importance of a strong work ethic and the importance of delivering high quality in everything that you do. He always told them that the best thing that he could do for them was to give them an education. And he was in the export-import business, and he traveled to Canada and to the U.S., and he was really impressed at the quality of life that he saw, and he wanted one of his children to settle in the U.S. My father had just finished his first year of chemical engineering school in India and did receive a technical admission to a school in Manhattan. He wasn't sure he wanted to go. I think he probably didn't. But his father pulled together the resources and bought him a boat and a plane ticket. And he came to New York City with $200, and I think he would have returned home if he had enough money for a return ticket. He was lonely. He was scared. It was a big city. He had no friends. He had no family. And it actually turns out that the school that he came to didn't actually have a campus. So for the first 2 weeks, he stayed in a hotel with several other people. And then ultimately, at the end of the semester, moved to the University of Indiana. And at that time, foreign students were only allowed to work in the summers. So he finished and put himself through 4 years of engineering school by having 3 jobs at the same time during the summer. So he was a busboy and a draftsman and a teacher aide. And you asked what what shaped me. And I would say that my parents gave me the same opportunities and encouragement that they gave my brother. They believed deeply in sports and education. They wanted to keep me both healthy physically and mentally. And, wanted to keep me busy. They taught me time management. And, I think part of the reason they wanted to keep me busy was to also keep me out of trouble. From my very early age, education was a high priority. It was never a question of, am I going to go to college? It was a question of which college. And more than anything, I think they instilled in me our family values. And that was really by watching them work as hard as they did to support our immediate family and our extended family. And they did this with a tremendous amount of love and grace.
It must be so incredible for them to see where you've reached today. Hearing you speak about how your mother was treated, I was just recalling an experience I had in a classroom a few weeks ago. And I was speaking to one of the young women who had just graduated from college. She comes from a small town in rural Karnataka. And she was telling me I was the one who was supposed to be a doctor, and my brother was supposed to be an engineer. And my parents told me that I have to go to the cheapest college in my town. His father is a government clerk, so they don't have a lot of money, but they took a loan of $10,000 to send him to Russia for medical school. She resisted marriage 3 times. They tried to get her married at the end of 10th grade, 12th grade, and after college, and she resisted every time. And I'm just looking at you and thinking, how did you get here? And could your parents have ever imagined this journey for you?
I don't think they could have imagined this journey for themselves or for me and my brother or for the family members that they sponsored. I think they're very grateful for what life has given them. Hearing that story that you mentioned, I do hope that she is able to stick with her passion, her confidence in terms of what she wants to do, because it's not only her probably that will be able to study and accomplish what she wants to, but then maybe even the future generations that will be able to benefit from her sacrifice.
I'd love to go back to something you said, which was your parents were trying to keep you out of trouble. So if you can share a little bit about who you were as a young girl, describe yourself, and what's a quality or a few qualities about you that have stayed the same.
I grew up in Plano, Texas, and I was just very spunky. I was athletic. I was a fashionista. I was interested in education, but not like I was in college or now. And, I was the type of girl who would go to the playground and supposed to be home like 2 hours before I actually made it home. And my parents would have the police out looking for me. So I definitely had a rebellious side of me as well. But in terms of what's never changed, it's really my love for my family. And I would say a desire to succeed, but that success has really changed in terms of how I define it from when I was a young girl to now. I would say the way I defined success as an earlier in my life was as other people defined it for me. And now I define success in a way for me. And I think that's very different. Of course, I still love to be that spunky little girl inside of me who loves to work out and have fun with my kids.
And speaking of this working out, I think it's a little unusual for children of Indian immigrants to place such a huge emphasis on sports and on gymnastics, no less. So I would love to hear more about your journey as a gymnast.
I started athletics with swimming and soccer and gymnastics when I was 2 years old. I just had so much energy. And again, my parents wanted me, be a little bit more structured and learn how to manage my time. But really, by the time I was 8 years old and my brother's doing sports and I'm doing sports and my mom's carpooling us everywhere, gymnastics got to the point where it was 5 days a week and probably at that time, 30 hours a week of training. And she kind of said at that time, Meena, it would be really great if you can just focus on one sport. And I chose gymnastics because I loved it. And by the time I was 15, I moved away from home to train for the Olympics. And that was my goal, was to represent our country doing gymnastics. And it was just so myopical. It was really all that I focused on and cared about. And so I moved away from home to train with a coach in Oklahoma. My mom went part-time. She lived with me 3 days a week in Oklahoma from Texas. And the other time I lived with my coach. And I had a phenomenal experience, but I grew 4 inches. I put on 20 pounds and I wasn't good enough to go to the Olympics. And so I moved back home and I finished out my high school years as a gymnast. And I did receive a full scholarship to a Division I school. I competed in all around until I blew out my knee my junior year and I tore my ACL. And so at that time, I actually had to stay on campus to do rehab over the summer. And one of my teammates said to me, why don't you go intern at this place called Friedman Billings Ramsey, which was a finance firm. And up until that time, I was just following my brother's footsteps into economics as well as pre-med because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But the moment I set forth on that trading floor, I just loved it. And like that competitive juice that I had in gymnastics came out in something else. And I could not learn enough about markets and macro and micro and how to do stock analysis and credit analysis. And so I quickly dropped my pre-med major. I finished with econ. And then I started my career as an investment banking analyst at JP Morgan before joining Goldman Sachs a year afterwards, and feel very fortunate that I felt like my career was a hobby.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone speak so passionately about being on a trading floor. And you spoke about macros and micros and the excitement of trading and the energy on the floor. How do we get more women to feel that passionately about the world of investments, about being on that trading floor? What do you think it takes?
I think it just takes education and being aware of it. And I think the first thing it starts with is financial literacy. I think being able to start at a young age with having financial literacy, whether or not you decide to go into finance or not, to be able to learn the power of compounding with money is something that is life-changing for people. It encourages them to save money and not spend money, and that really builds on itself to be able to prepare one for their life and ultimately for retirement. The other thing is whether I would say it's seeking people out like myself, and there's plenty of people that are like me, and just to ask about what makes them tick. Why did they decide to go into finance? And what do they enjoy about it? And what skill sets are important? And there's so many different areas of finance. You know, everybody thinks, oh, investment banking or trading, but there's so many different things. There's strats, there's engineers, there's research analysts, there's investors, you know, there are the bankers, there are the wealth managers. And so there's so many different facets of it also, that to be open-minded to what one can learn and accomplish and ultimately make the organization and your clients better by being a part of and by doing it, really uses multiple different types of people from different backgrounds and, again, skill sets. But I do believe that women are very, very good in this industry. I think women tend to be very detailed oriented, and so they will really understand a risk that they are going to take. They will try to diligence that risk as much as they can before they take it. So people always ask me, are women more risk averse than men? I don't find that. I find that women are more risk aware sometimes than men, because they will ask those questions and they do feel comfortable asking those questions. And then the other thing is that I think there's part of women that is just a little less intimidating. And when you're interacting with a client and the client feels completely comfortable with you and they start to trust you, they will completely open up to what they are worried about or what they are trying to solve for. And ultimately, when you're able to establish that sort of relationship with a client, you're really able to help them. And so I think it's the interpersonal skills as well. There is a tremendous opportunity in this industry for women, and there's a lot of room. I do encourage, and maybe that's because I'm biased because I love it so much, but I do encourage just thinking outside of some of what we deem growing up were traditional roles or jobs, such as engineering or medicine, and branching out a little bit more when you're, thinking about what you could do and what you really enjoy doing.
I'm thinking about you on this trading floor like 25 years ago. Can you share with me, how did you feel on that floor as a woman, as a young student?
For whatever reason, it did not faze me at that time. You're right, there were not a lot of women on the trading floor. There were not a lot of younger folks on the trading floor, right? And so the combination of those two things, maybe it was a little of my mom and me kind of just being like, go have fun, go try it. And if it doesn't work, we'll switch gears. So at that stage, it wasn't something that was daunting to me. I would also say that I was very fortunate to have throughout my entire career some really amazing male sponsors. And I define sponsorship and mentorship very differently. And I would encourage people to think about sponsorship and who are their sponsors. But sponsors are people who are more senior to you, who can really help shape and impact your career. Could be a manager, or it could be, somebody in just a more senior role. And I had that. I had that from the time I was an intern all the way till when I made partner, and still to this day.
When we speak about women in male dominant spaces, we talk about women supporting other women, being champions for other women. And I think we almost do a disservice to the men who support us and play a role in that journey. So can you speak a little bit about the men in your life and how they have enabled you? I think one of them is that sponsor that you mentioned. I know you've talked a lot about your husband as your partner, your father. So can you speak a little bit about these men and what kind of men do you need around you?
I've been very fortunate in terms of having some amazing male sponsors in my life. And, I wouldn't call my father, actually, probably I would. I'd call my biggest cheerleader, my biggest supporter. Both my father and my husband, just full of respect and encouragement, and also just encourage me all the time not to take things so seriously and make sure that I also take care of myself. So really good balance. But in the professional setting, there was times, for example, when I had my first child and we were in the middle of the financial crisis, and I was really torn between working and being at home with my son. On the job front, I had just been given a promotion where I was managing a team that was, on average 10 years more experienced than me and was all male. And that was my first time to be a manager. And I had, just had my first child. And again, it's the financial crisis. And at that time, I did not think I was doing a good job at anything. I actually just wanted to take a step back and resign and just focus on actually getting healthy myself, but really being able to spend time with my son, and then eventually maybe getting back into the workforce. But my manager said to me at that time, who was a guy, he said, I'm not letting you go anywhere. He said, you go back out on maternity leave. I have your back. Get healthy, sleep, and then come back. And believe it or not, that's what I did. And that's all I needed actually, was to help manage my anxiety, was actually to sleep, to get healthy, to figure out how to balance everything. And fast forward 5 years later, when I made partner, my first call after my parents and husband was to him, to thank him for not letting me resign. And so there's men like that are out there, and they really need to be championed. And I'm very grateful for them.
And you spoke a little bit about the qualities of a woman that make you successful, effective in this world of investment and trading, right? Similarly, can you talk about how being a mother has helped you as a professional? What are the qualities of motherhood that have made you better, even at work? And how would you support young women who went through a similar journey? Because as we know, most of the time, once you drop out of the workforce after becoming a mother, only about 25% of those women are going to come back.
Yes, I 100% would encourage people to stay in. A couple things. One is I found myself to be actually better at my job as a mother. Because of the way I'm wired, I'm constantly kind of replaying things in my head and how I could have done things better, or thinking about a business plan. And then when you have a child and you walk in the door and that child needs your and warrants your undivided attention, that stuff just kind of goes to the side and you really give your child that attention. And by actually checking out a little bit from a work perspective, it made me more effective because I was able to compartmentalize a little bit more. So I think it made me better professional. And also, I've been really transparent with my children as it pertains to some of the struggles that I go through at work and even outside of work. I want them to know that life is not a straight line up. Life has a lot of struggles. And I think it's important that our kids see us work through these struggles so that they know that they're normal and that they're going to be able to make it through. And the last thing is, especially after I shared my first maternity story with you, any of the women that I mentor, I work with, et cetera, I don't let them tell me when they're coming back to work when they go out on maternity leave. I think it's really important that you take the time, and you don't know how much time that's going to be for you because everybody's experience is different.
You are also the co-lead of the Goldman Sachs Global Inclusion and Diversity Committee. You've spoken a lot about, the inclusion of women in the workforce. How does that play into your role now in this position of influence, and thinking about how inclusion and diversity helps your business, and what does that really look like in a place like Goldman Sachs?
I appreciate you asking. I think I was asked to co-head our effort for the firm, maybe because of how I approach inclusion, because I think if you have an inclusive environment where people feel comfortable bringing their perspectives to the table, their ideas to the table, then you will have a more diverse workforce. And I think that diversity comes in many forms. It comes in socioeconomic, it comes in sex, it comes in age, it comes in religious perspectives, sexual preference, et cetera. And so I think there's many different types of diversity, but at the end of the day, if you have an inclusive environment where people feel like they can be themselves, you're going to have a more productive and happier workforce that leads to a more diverse workforce. And that's what me and my co-head really focus on. In terms of why I think I'm able to bring that perspective to the firm, I do think some of it is because of the way that, some of the stuff I grew up with. And, I would just say as a Indian girl in Texas, especially one who was focused on sports, it was just different. And, there were not a lot of Indians in my school or in my community at that time. And this has definitely changed. But when you are called names because you look differently or you have different joys or passions in life, it definitely sticks with you. But I think by going through that, it also softens your heart to other people who are going through whatever they're going through, and it makes you a more empathetic person. And over time, and this is where I am finally now in my life as almost a 47-year-old, is that I don't place as much importance on what other people think of me. But it took me a really long time to accomplish that. But I do think I'm in a much better place now because I do let those negative comments go more easily.
So 47 years to feel comfortable and confident in your own skin. Is there a way to get there faster?
I think, probably when I turned 40 or something, it's probably when it did, whether it was like being comfortable in my skin or feeling like I really had a seat at the table at the office. I am hoping that I'm going to get my daughter there and everybody who works with me there a lot faster. I'll give you a story. Like when I was doing gymnastics, I used to dread competing because I was so nervous and I had so much anxiety. And I would say that I kind of finally clicked in me, I don't know, maybe in my 30s, with work in the same way, which is I work so hard. Like when I have to go do a presentation, or if I need to go on TV, or if I need to speak to our upper management, once you've prepared, just go have fun with it. Just try to have fun. And actually now that's what I do. But again, that was my timeline.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any shortcut to some of these things. So it's more of a journey and a process of evolution, probably, where every step got you a bit closer. But you are now one of the most senior women at one of the most prestigious investment banks in the world, a firm that employs over 40,000 people. How does that feel?
Fortunate. I would say I feel very fortunate. I feel lucky. I feel like I'm proud of myself for showing up every day from when I was a little girl to now in terms of putting in the hard work. And I feel a lot of responsibility for our people, for our clients, for my fellow partners, for our shareholders, and to lift up more women around me. And, we've definitely had some good success. More than half of our partners in my business are women, but we're going to make more. We'll have more at the organization because there's a lot of people that are focused on it.
One of the things that talked a lot about when we think about what it takes for women to achieve a similar height as you is that it's not just the mentors and sponsors, it's structural changes that are required in companies, in the communities and societies that we live in. So as a leader now, you're actually in a position to influence some of those structures and systems. What are a few of those systems that you would like to see change?
I would say that championing as a parent, championing your daughter as you champion your son, it starts from there, right? And it starts from little girls kind of questioning the status quo and thinking big. And so structurally, if I could be so bold, that is, something that around the world would love for there to be more openness and awareness for. I do think that regardless of the community or the corporation, recognizing that the impact that the men can have in our success is paramount in championing those men. I do believe, like I said, I have a big responsibility, as do other women in my position, to give a voice to younger women and give a platform to younger women who don't have it at that time, but give them the opportunity to let them shine. And then when they shine, step out of the way and let them run. And I think that's what I try to do and what I know a lot of my other female partners try to do, but there's got to be more of that.
We hosted you in Mumbai, and you had the opportunity to meet some of our alumni. And one of them is a young woman who is about to join Goldman Sachs when she graduates from college. This woman's name is Shalini. Her father actually had an accident, is handicapped, and they rely on coconut trees around their home to survive. Her starting salary at Goldman Sachs is 37 lakhs, 37 times her family's annual income as a young woman at 21. One, I think she posted on LinkedIn about how moved she was to meet you. So thank you for making the time to meet her and spend time with her. But what does it take to create more such examples, to create that kind of transformation, not just in women's lives, but of women who are coming from disadvantage?
I would say Avanti had a huge part in her story, and championing organizations such as Avanti who can identify the children who have the potential, want the opportunity, and to provide them with that opportunity is life-changing. It's life-changing for her, and it's going to be life-changing for her family, and it's going to be life-changing for the generations that come after her. And so I think it takes people to start organizations like you did with Avanti, for people like me to support organizations like that. And then also to firms like Goldman to be able to recruit fellows like Avanti fellows, or from, schools from that have had children who have had similar backgrounds. Ultimately, the amount of grit and passion and hard work that these individuals have, and the way that they manage their life, quite frankly, is just so impressive. Any organization would be so lucky to have them.
I love that you talked about their grit being an advantage. I was just in a classroom in central India, and these students come from villages. They're children of farmers, daily wage laborers. And I was talking to them, and they did really well on their competitive exams. And I was talking to them because we often talk about their disadvantage. And so if we can create as a society, like through firms like Goldman, through mentors and advocates like you, through organizations, educational organizations that create pathways, all they need is that door, right? And maybe some of the fear comes from saying, these people are going to do a lot better than us, right? They're going to rise up a lot faster because they're going to be the first one in the door and the last one out every day because of the way that they grew up. So I love that you shared that message. Thank you for that. And that's going to be so inspiring for them to hear from you. We are just going to transition. We have a few questions from our students. One of the questions is from 15-year-old Pallavi. She's a student at one of our residential schools in Karnataka in the south of India. Her father is a farmer and her mom is a nurse and her inspiration. And her dream is to become an army doctor and give back to society as a doctor. Do you have any personal motto that you adhere to? She asks.
What I would just say is I have so many things that I tell myself. I talk to myself constantly, whether that's keep going, whether that's you got this, whether that's be patient. And so when sometimes I write myself little notes and I just put the initials and I'll stick them on my computer so I just remember. And so I wouldn't say that there's one motto. I would say that I try, and this is something my father instilled in me, I just try to keep talking to myself to keep myself from almost hurting myself, because you can start thinking really negatively and you can start letting the anxiety or the stress get to you, but you have to talk yourself out of it. And so to me, it's a little bit from that vantage point, and depending on what's going on in life, I would say my motto changes based on that.
I love that voice in your head. To make that voice a really positive one for yourself is so important. Thanks so much to Meena for being on the show. If you enjoyed that episode, do tune in every week as we sit down with more remarkable women. The podcast is hosted by Avanti Fellows, a nonprofit that breaks the cycle of poverty in India by providing access to post-secondary education for students from underserved communities. With this show, we aim to inspire thousands of young people with these real-life stories of incredible female leaders who have made a lasting impact on their industries. To learn more about the work we do, visit www.avantifellows.org.